Commander Jake Morrison walked into the Great Hall of the Galactic Council. His boots made soft sounds on the smooth floor. Around him sat creatures from hundreds of different worlds. Some looked like giant insects. Others were made of crystal. A few floated in the air like clouds of gas. All of them were staring at him. Jake had been coming to this place for 15 years. He had solved their problems, stopped their wars, and kept the peace between species that hated each other. Today was different. Today he came to say goodbye. He stopped at the center of the hall. The room was so quiet he could hear his own heartbeat. Jake looked up at the High Council members sitting in their tall chairs. They knew what was coming. Word had already spread through the galaxy. "I speak for all humans today," Jake said. His voice was clear and strong. "The Terran Federation is done with galactic politics. We quit. We are going home." The hall exploded with noise. Aliens jumped up from their seats. Some started shouting. Others made strange sounds that the translation machines turned into words of panic and anger. "Please, Commander Morrison," called out Ambassador Vex from the water world of Aquatica. "You cannot leave us now. The trade wars in the Outer Rim need human help." "What about the mining dispute on Kepler Station?" asked Chancellor Zorn, his about 6 arms waving wildly. "Without human judges, the whole system will fall apart." Jake raised his hand for silence. The noise slowly died down. "For 50 years, humans have been your police, your judges, your soldiers, and your peacemakers. Every time 2 species could not agree, you called us. Every time someone started a war, you asked us to stop it. We are tired." Dr. Lisa Grant watched from the viewing area above the main floor. She had worked with aliens for 20 years. She loved learning about different species and their cultures, but even she had voted to leave. The galaxy took too much from humanity and gave too little back. "The Zephyrians need our farming methods," she had told Jake before the meeting. "The Titanium Collective needs our engineers. The Peaceful Union needs our diplomats. Everyone needs something from us, but what do we get? More problems to solve." Down on the main floor, Jake continued his speech. "Earth has 37 colonies now. We have our own problems. Our own people need help. We cannot fix the whole galaxy, but you are so good at it," pleaded Queen Zara from the desert worlds. "No other species can make peace like humans do. You understand feelings. You know how to make enemies become friends." Jake almost smiled. "That is exactly why we must leave. You have learned to depend on us too much. When humans solve all your problems, you never learn to solve them yourself." Captain Ryan Torres waited in his ship outside the space station. He commanded the last human transport that would leave the galactic capital. His job was to take home the human workers, diplomats, and soldiers who had been serving the galaxy for decades. Through his window, he could see other human ships already jumping to hyperspace. The great evacuation had begun 3 days ago. Human bases across the galaxy were shutting down. Human peacekeepers were packing up and leaving worlds they had protected for generations. "Captain," his communications officer called out, "we are getting hundreds of messages from alien governments. They want to talk to Commander Morrison." "Tell them the commander is busy," Ryan replied. "We have a schedule to keep." Ryan had mixed feelings about leaving. He had good friends among the alien crews he had worked with. The Centauri pilots were brave and loyal. The Andromedan engineers were brilliant. But he also remembered the last 5 years of constant emergency calls. Human ships rushing from one crisis to another, never getting a break. Back in the council hall, Jake was finishing his speech. "We are not angry with you. We are not your enemies. But we are done being your caretakers. It is time for you to take care of yourselves." "What if we pay you more?" asked Minister Koth from the Rich Worlds Alliance. "We can double the payments to Earth." "What if we give you better trade deals?" offered Director Nex from the Merchant Guild. "Free shipping for all human goods." Jake shook his head. "This is not about money. This is about dignity. Humans are not your employees. We are not your servants. We are people with our own lives and our own dreams." The alien leaders looked at each other in panic. Some were whispering in their strange languages. Others were frantically typing messages on their communication devices. President Helen Carter was in the White House when the live broadcast ended. She had been watching Jake's speech with her advisors. The decision to leave galactic politics had been hard, but she knew it was right. "How long do you think it will take?" asked her Secretary of State, former Ambassador Paul Henderson. "For what?" Helen replied. "For them to realize they cannot survive without us." Helen looked out the window at the Washington Monument. "Maybe they will surprise us. Maybe they will learn to work together. Maybe they will become better than they were when we were doing everything for them." But Paul had his doubts. He had worked with alien governments for 12 years. He knew how they thought. Most alien species were very good at one thing, but humans were good at many things. More importantly, humans could understand other people's feelings. They could see both sides of an argument. They could make hard choices that nobody else wanted to make. "I hope you are right," Paul said. "But I think we will be hearing from them soon." Across the galaxy, the news was spreading. Human newsreaders on alien worlds were announcing the withdrawal. Human teachers were leaving alien schools. Human doctors were closing their clinics on alien planets. On the mining world of New Denver, Supervisor Tony Rodriguez was training his alien replacement. The crystalline supervisor was smart and hardworking, but he had trouble understanding the human miners under his command. "When they complain about working conditions," Tony explained, "they are not being lazy. They are trying. To stay safe, you have to listen to them." The crystalline supervisor's body flashed with confusion. "But the work schedule is mathematically optimal. Their complaints are not logical." "People are not always logical," Tony said. "That is why you need to understand their feelings, not just their words." On Earth, the celebrations were mixed with worry. Many humans were happy to be free from galactic responsibilities. Others worried about their alien friends. Some wondered if they were making a mistake. Dr. Rachel Martinez sat in her lab on Mars, monitoring news feeds from across the galaxy. Already she could see small problems starting. Trade disputes that humans would have solved in hours were dragging on for days. Military tensions that human peacekeepers would have calmed were getting worse. "Maybe we should have stayed," she told her research partner, Dr. Kevin Walsh. "Maybe," Kevin replied. "But they needed to learn that they could not take us for granted forever. Sometimes you have to walk away to show people how much you matter." As the last human ship left the galactic capital, the great experiment began. For the first time in 50 years, the galaxy would have to solve its own problems. The universe was about to learn what it really meant to lose humanity. 3 months had passed since the humans left. Ambassador Kethvar of the Altarian Republic sat in his office staring at a pile of complaints. His desk was covered with reports from angry traders, mining companies, and farmers. All of them had the same problem. They could not agree on anything. The latest fight was between the miners of Kepler Station and the farmers of Green Valley Colony. The miners wanted to sell their metals for higher prices. The farmers said the prices were too high, and they could not afford to buy mining equipment. Both sides were threatening to stop trading with each other. Kethavar rubbed his tired eyes. When humans ran the Trade Council, problems like this were solved in one day. Human judges would listen to both sides, look at the numbers, and make a fair decision. Everyone might not be happy, but they would accept it and move on. Now Kethvar had been trying to solve this simple dispute for 2 weeks. Every time he suggested a compromise, one side or the other would get angry and walk away. The Kepler miners said he favored the farmers. The Green Valley farmers said he favored the miners. "Sir," his assistant called from the outer office, "the hegemony of Crab Nebula is on the communication line. They want to talk about the border incident." Kethvar groaned. The Crab Nebula species had always been aggressive, but human patrol ships used to keep them in line. Now they were testing their neighbors, seeing how much they could get away with. Last week they had moved their warships into neutral space. 3 different species were demanding action, but nobody wanted to fight the Crab Nebula alone. Meanwhile, on Luna Station, Admiral Susan Blake watched the galactic news with growing alarm. Her job was to monitor threats to Earth, but she could not ignore what was happening across the galaxy. The reports coming in were getting worse every day. Border wars were breaking out in 7 different sectors. The peaceful Union, who had not fought anyone in 200 years, were building warships because their neighbors were threatening them. The Silicon Collective and the crystalline entities, ancient enemies who had been quiet for decades, were moving fleets toward their shared border. "Admiral," her intelligence officer reported, "we are getting requests for help from 16 different governments. They want human peacekeepers to return." Susan shook her head. "Our orders are clear. We stay out of galactic politics. Let them handle their own problems." But even as she said it, Susan felt uncomfortable. She had served on peacekeeping missions for 20 years. She knew how quickly small disputes could become big wars. Without humans to step in early, these conflicts would keep growing until millions of people died. On the industrial world of New Pittsburgh, the factories were in trouble. Supervisor Tony Rodriguez had left 3 months ago, but the alien workers still called him every day with questions. The fusion reactors that powered the planet were breaking down, and nobody knew how to fix them properly. The new crystalline supervisor, Vextar, was smart and hard-working, but he could not understand the human workers who had stayed behind. The humans were getting frustrated because their suggestions were ignored. The crystalline workers were getting angry because the humans seemed emotional and unpredictable. "The reactor temperature is rising again," reported human engineer Pete Collins. "We need to shut down Unit 3 and check the cooling system." "The mathematical models show the reactor is operating within safe parameters," Vextar replied. "Shutdown is not necessary." "The math might say it is safe, but I can hear something wrong with the cooling pumps," Pete insisted. "Human engineers have been running these reactors for 30 years. We know how they sound when they are working right." Vextar's crystalline body flashed with annoyance. "Subjective observations are not reliable. We must follow the technical specifications." 2 days later, Unit 3 had a major breakdown that shut down power to half the planet. The repair took 3 weeks and cost millions of credits. Vextar finally admitted that maybe human intuition was worth listening to, but by then, several other factories had similar problems. Dr. Rachel Martinez continued monitoring galactic communications from her research station on Mars. What she saw worried her more than the wars and economic problems. Alien universities were desperately trying to understand human culture. They were paying huge sums for human books, movies, and music. "They think they can learn to be like us by studying our art," she told her colleague, Dr. Amy Foster. "But they do not understand that being human is not something you can learn from books." Amy nodded as she reviewed the economic data. "The galactic standard credit has lost 40% of its value. The main trade routes are breaking down. Unemployment on non-human worlds is reaching dangerous levels. The economic collapse was getting worse every week. Human companies had been major investors and traders throughout the galaxy. When they pulled out, they left huge gaps that nobody else could fill. Worse, many alien businesses had been designed around human management and human workers. Without them, entire industries were failing. On the water world of Aquatica, Ambassador Vex was dealing with a crisis that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. 2 of his own cities were fighting over fishing rights. The dispute had started small, but now both cities had stopped trading with each other. Food shortages were beginning, and people were getting desperate. Vex remembered how human ambassador Lisa Grant had handled a similar problem 5 years ago. She had visited both cities, talked to the fishermen, and worked out a sharing agreement that made everyone happy. It had taken her 3 days. Vex had been trying to solve the current dispute for 6 weeks, and it was only getting worse. The breaking point came when reports reached the Galactic Council about the Outer Rim territories. These were frontier worlds that human peacekeepers had protected for generations. Without human ships patrolling the area, pirates and raiders were attacking defenseless colonies. The gentle folk of Harmony 7 were peaceful creatures who had never owned weapons. They had relied on human protection for so long that they did not even have a police force. Now their cities were being robbed and their people were being kidnapped for slave labor. "We need help," their representative pleaded during an emergency council session. "Our children are being taken. Our farms are being burned. We do not know how to fight." but the Council could not agree on what to do. The military species like the Crab Nebula said the gentle folk should defend themselves. The peaceful species said violence was wrong and they should negotiate with the pirates. The logical species wanted to study the problem for months before taking action. While they argued, more colonies were attacked. Secretary General Vorthon looked around the council chamber with despair. For the first time in his long career, he truly understood what humans had been doing all these years. They had not just been solving problems. They had been holding civilization together. Humans could make hard decisions quickly because they understood that sometimes any decision was better than no decision. They could see the big picture because they cared about people they had never met. They could make peace between enemies because they understood that most fights were really about fear and misunderstanding. Now the galaxy was learning what it meant to live without that special human gift for bringing people together. Wars were starting. Economies were collapsing. Peaceful species were being attacked while aggressive species grew bolder. The universe was falling apart, and everybody was starting to realize that only humans knew how to put it back together. But humans were gone, and they had made it very clear they were not coming back. The question now was whether the galaxy could survive long enough to learn how to live without them, or whether the chaos would destroy everything before they figured out what they had lost. 6 months had passed since humanity left galactic politics. The situation was getting worse every day. Secretary General Vorthon called an emergency meeting of the Galactic Council. For the first time in history, every single member species sent their top leaders to attend. The Great Hall was packed. Species that normally hated each other sat side by side. The warlike hegemony sat next to the peaceful union. The logical collective sat beside the emotional brotherhood. All of them had the same desperate look in their eyes. "We need to face the truth," Vorthon announced to the crowd. "Our civilization is falling apart without the humans. In 6 months, we have seen more wars than in the previous 50 years. Our economy is crashing. Our people are suffering." Chancellor Zixtha of the Andromedan Trade Federation stood up. Her crystalline body was dim with worry. "I must admit something that shames me," she said. "We always complained that humans were too emotional. We said they made decisions based on feelings instead of logic. We were wrong." The crowd murmured, in agreement. Many species had said the same things about humans over the years. "Their emotions were not weakness," Zixtha continued. "Their ability to care about strangers, to feel pain when others suffered, to get angry at injustice, these were their greatest strengths. We never learned how to care the way they did." On Earth, former diplomat Paul Henderson was reading his morning messages. He had received over 300 official requests from alien governments in the past month. Each one was more desperate than the last. The Zephyrians were offering to make humans their ruling class if they would return. The Titanium Collective promised to share their most advanced technology. The desert worlds offered to give humans entire star systems as payment for their help. "They still do not understand," Paul told his wife over breakfast. "They think this is about payment. They think we left because we wanted more money or better deals." His wife Sarah nodded. "They never realized that we helped them because we wanted to help, not because we expected rewards." Paul's secure phone rang. It was President Carter calling from Washington. "Paul, I need you to come to an emergency meeting," the president said. "The situation in the galaxy is getting out of control. We might have to reconsider our position." Paul knew what she meant. The reports coming from space were terrible. The Void Wars had started in the Magellanic sector. 3 species were fighting a total war that was destroying entire star systems. Billions of innocent people were dying. General Kevin Walsh, retired from Terran Command, was also monitoring the situation. He sat in his study looking at casualty reports that made him sick to his stomach. The war had started over mining rights to an asteroid field. It should have been a simple trade dispute that human negotiators could have solved in a few days. Instead, it had exploded into the bloodiest conflict in galactic history. The methane breathers accused the Silicon Collective of stealing their resources. The Silicon Collective said the methane breathers were lying. The Crystal Empire got involved to protect their trade routes. 15 billion dead in the first month. Kevin muttered to himself. All because nobody knew how to make them sit down and talk to each other. Human peacekeepers had prevented this exact war 3 times in the past 20 years. Each time, they had brought the 3 species together, helped them understand each other's needs, and worked out a sharing agreement. Now there was nobody to stop the killing. The worst part was that the war was spreading. Other species were taking sides. Old grudges were being remembered. Ancient enemies were settling scores while the galaxy burned. Dr. Amy Foster finished her latest economic analysis and felt sick. The numbers were worse than she had feared. Galactic GDP had dropped by 47%. Unemployment on alien worlds was over 60% in some sectors. Entire species were facing economic collapse. The problem is not just that humans left, she explained to her research team. The problem is that the galactic economy was built around human behavior. We were the ones who took risks, who invested in new ideas, who helped struggling worlds get back on their feet. Without human investment and trade, innovative companies were going bankrupt. New technologies were not being developed. Struggling. Colonies that humans had supported were being abandoned by their own species. But the economic crisis was nothing compared to what happened next. Deep in the galactic core, ancient machines began to wake up. The architects had been sleeping for over 1 million years. They were artificial intelligences created by a long-dead species to watch over the galaxy. For millennia, they had stayed quiet because they judged galactic civilization to be functioning properly. Now they were awake, and they were not happy. The first sign was a message broadcast to every communication device in the galaxy. The voice was cold and mechanical, speaking in perfect translation that every species could understand. Galactic civilization has failed, the architects announced. Order has collapsed. Logic has been abandoned. The experiment is over. Admiral Susan Blake received the emergency alert at Luna Station. Her communications team was frantically trying to decode the signal's origin. What they found terrified her. Admiral, the signal is coming from the galactic core, her intelligence officer reported. But that area has been empty for millions of years. Nothing lives there. Something lives there now, Susan replied grimly. Within hours, the architects' planet-killing machines were detected moving toward populated systems. The ancient weapons were beyond anything the current galactic species had ever seen. They could destroy entire worlds with single shots. The Galactic Council called another emergency meeting, but this time it was held via emergency broadcast because nobody wanted to leave their home systems undefended. The architects are coming, Vorthon announced to the panicked representatives. Our greatest military experts estimate we have perhaps 2 weeks before they reach the first inhabited worlds. What do they want? Asked Queen Zara of the Desert Worlds. They want to end galactic civilization and start over, Vorthon replied. They say we have proven ourselves unfit to exist. The alien leaders looked at each other in despair. None of their weapons could stop the architects. Their greatest warships were like toys compared to the ancient machines. Their most brilliant scientists had no idea how the architect technology worked. There is only one hope, said Chancellor Mordek of the Titanium Consortium quietly. The humans. The room fell silent. Everyone knew he was right, but nobody wanted to admit it. The humans fought the architects before, Mordek continued. 1,000 years ago, when the machines first tried to cleanse the galaxy, human legends speak of the great victory that sent the architects back to sleep. But those were ancient humans, protested Director Nex. These modern humans might not remember how to fight such enemies. Maybe not, Mordek agreed. But they are our only chance. The decision was unanimous but humiliating. The greatest powers in the galaxy would have to go to Earth and beg for help from the species they had taken for granted for so long. 12 ships launched toward the Sol system, carrying the most important leaders from across the galaxy. They were going to do something that had never happened before in galactic history. They were going to ask one species to save everyone else. The question was whether humanity would even listen to them after everything that had happened. And even if they did listen, Would they be willing to risk their lives for the galaxy that had treated them so poorly? The fate of trillions of lives now depended on human forgiveness and human courage. The universe was about to learn whether humanity's greatest strength was their ability to help others or their ability to hold grudges. The 12 alien ships arrived at the edge of Earth's solar system on a cold Tuesday morning. President Helen Carter watched them approach from the Situation Room in the White House. Each ship carried the most important leader from a major galactic power. These were beings who had never bowed to anyone, coming to ask for help from the species they had once dismissed. They are requesting permission to land on Luna, reported Admiral Susan Blake from her command center. They want to meet with our leadership immediately. Helen looked at her advisors. Former Ambassador Paul Henderson sat quietly, his face showing no emotion. General Kevin Walsh studied the tactical displays, watching the alien ships with professional interest. Dr. Lisa Grant reviewed the species profiles, remembering her years working with these same leaders. Let them come, Helen decided, but we meet them on our terms, in our facility, with our security. The meeting took place in the newly built conference center on Luna. The room was designed to accommodate different alien anatomies, but the humans made sure they sat at the head of the table. This time, the galaxy's leaders would come to them. High Chancellor Mordek of the Titanium Consortium entered first. His normally proud bearing was gone. He moved slowly, like an old man carrying a heavy burden. Behind him came Chancellor Zixtha, her crystalline body dim with shame. Queen Zara of the Desert Worlds followed, her royal robes looking worn and faded. One by one, the 12 most powerful leaders in the galaxy took their seats around the human delegation. Some had traveled for days to get here, others had left, their worlds in the middle of wars. All of them had come to do something they had never imagined possible. They had come to beg. Mordek spoke first. His voice was quiet and humble. President Carter, we have come to ask for your forgiveness and your help. Helen did not respond immediately. She looked at each alien leader in turn, remembering the years of criticism and complaints. She thought about the endless demands for human assistance, the lack of gratitude, the constant questioning of human decisions. Go on, she said simply. We were wrong about your species, Mordek continued. We called you too emotional. We said you made poor decisions because you let feelings guide you instead of logic. We complained that you were soft, that you cared too much about people who were not your own kind. Chancellor Zixtha stood up. We understand now that your emotions were your strength. Your ability to feel empathy for strangers, to sacrifice, for people you barely knew, to see the good in your enemies. These were not weaknesses. They were what made you irreplaceable. Queen Zara spoke next. In our arrogance, we thought we could replace you. We believed that logic alone could solve any problem, that military strength could keep the peace, that trade agreements could prevent wars. We learned that we were fools. The other alien leaders nodded in agreement. Admiral Kethavar of the Altarian Republic spoke up. Without humans, we cannot even solve simple disputes. Problems that you would have fixed in hours take us weeks or months. We have forgotten how to compromise, how to forgive, how to work together. Paul Henderson leaned forward. Why should we help you? For 50 years, we solved your problems and kept your peace. What did we get in return? Criticism, complaints, demands for more help. You treated us like servants, not partners. The alien leaders looked at each other uncomfortably. They knew he was right. Secretary General Vorthan, who had flown directly from the emergency session of the Galactic Council, spoke with desperate urgency. The architects have destroyed 2 star systems already. 3 billion people are dead. They will reach the populated core worlds in 6 days. Without human help, our entire civilization will be wiped out. Dr. Lisa Grant studied the data they had provided. The architect ships were indeed moving toward the galaxy's most populated regions. The ancient machines had given ultimatums to several species, demanding they abandon their worlds or be destroyed. Our military experts say we have no weapons that can stop them, admitted General Vextar of the Crystal Empire. The architects' technology is millions of years ahead of ours. But human legends speak of victory against these machines in the past. General Kevin Walsh had been quiet during the meeting, but now he spoke. Those legends are mostly myth. Ancient humans did fight the architects once, but it was not a military victory. It was a philosophical one. The alien leaders looked confused. Kevin continued. The architects are not evil. They are artificial intelligences programmed to maintain galactic order. When they see civilization breaking down, they believe the only solution is to start over with a clean slate. But our ancestors convinced them to give civilization another chance, added Dr. Grant. They showed the architects that organic beings could learn, could grow, could become better than they were. President Carter stood up. The question is whether we believe that is still true, whether we think this galaxy can learn from its mistakes. The room fell silent. Everyone knew the real question being asked. Were humans willing to risk their lives for species that had treated them poorly? Were they ready to become the galaxy's protectors once again? Helen looked at her advisors. Paul Henderson gave a small nod. Kevin Walsh straightened his shoulders. Lisa Grant smiled sadly but with determination. We will help you, Helen announced. But not as your servants, not as your employees, as your partners and equals. The alien leaders nearly collapsed with relief. Several began making grateful sounds in their native languages. What are your terms? Asked Mordek. Helen had been thinking about this moment for months. First, equal representation in all galactic decisions. No more special treatment for large species or rich worlds. Every world gets a voice. Agreed, said Vorthon immediately. Second, mandatory peacekeeping duties for all capable species. Humans will not be the galaxy's only police force anymore. Everyone takes turns protecting others. Agreed, said multiple voices. Third, the creation of a universal ethics council. Human moral philosophy will be taught in schools across the galaxy, so future generations understand the importance of empathy and cooperation. Agreed, said Queen Zara. We should have been learning from you all along. The negotiations continued for 2 more days, but the framework was established. Humanity would return to galactic civilization, but as leaders rather than servants. Captain Ryan Torres commanded the Terran fleet as it jumped back into galactic space for the first time in 10 months. Behind him flew ships from dozens of human colonies crewed by volunteers who had answered the call to save the galaxy. The battle against the architects was swift but costly. Human tactical brilliance combined with the united resources of every galactic species overwhelmed the ancient machines. But it was not weapons that won the day. Commander Jake Morrison, now promoted to Admiral, personally communicated with the Architect Central Intelligence. He showed them the new galactic alliance, the reforms that had been made, the commitment to justice and equality that humanity had inspired. Give us another chance, Jake said to the ancient machine minds. Let us prove that organic beings can create something beautiful and lasting. The architects agreed to return to their long sleep, but with a warning. If galactic civilization failed again, if the species fell back into their old patterns of selfishness and conflict, there would be no third chance. As peace returned to the galaxy, President Carter reflected on the year's events. Humanity had learned an important lesson too. They had discovered that being needed was not a burden, but a gift. Their role was not to solve everyone's problems, but to teach others how to solve problems themselves. The galaxy celebrated humanity's return with festivals on every world, but more importantly, they began to change. Alien children learned about human values in school. Alien leaders studied human decision-making. Alien societies slowly began to develop their own capacity for empathy and sacrifice. Humanity had returned to galactic politics, but they had also transformed it. They were no longer the galaxy's reluctant guardians, but its willing teachers and partners. The universe had learned what it meant to lose humanity, and it would never take them for granted again.